we're in the midst of an epidemic of obesity. It affects industrialized countries and developing countries alike. And it disproportionately affects our children and our youth. When I was a resident in family medicine about 20 years ago, it was unheard of to diagnose type 2 diabetes mellitus in a teenager, what we used to call adult onset diabetes. But within the last 10 years, I've had that experience, and more than once. And I have to tell you how deeply disturbing it is. For the first time in a century, the life expectancy of our youth may be shorter than that of their parents. So how did we get there? There are many reasons for this global epidemic of obesity. Amongst the factors that get talked about are screen time on television, on computers, and electronic games. And another big factor, and an important one, is the growth of the fast food industry with its supersized meals and soft drinks over the last few decades. But the one that I want to talk to you about today is the one that I call the shadow epidemic, and that is of inactivity and our sedentary way of life. The World Health Organization estimates that about 1/5 of cases of diabetes and 1/4 of cases of heart disease worldwide are caused by long-term physical inactivity. And it's also responsible for about 1/4 of all deaths globally. So what are the health benefits of exercise? That's a no-brainer, you ask. There are many. There is undisputable scientific evidence that regular physical activity reduces your risk of heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and even mental health problems. And the other thing is that the more of it you do, the better the health outcomes. Even in people with chronic disease, exercise reduces your risk of dying. And this doesn't apply to the young. In our oldest octogenarians, regular physical exercise improves balance and strength and reduces your risk of falling, which I know as a family doctor is an often devastating event in the life of a frail older person. So how much exercise do you need to get all these fantastic benefits from exercise? Surprisingly, it's not that much. The American College of Sports and Exercise Medicine and other similar bodies say that all you need to do is exercise moderately for 30 minutes, 5 times a week, or more vigorously for 20 minutes, 3 times a week, or some combination of both. So what does moderate exercise look like? Well, it's as simple as going for a brisk walk or working in your garden. And what does more vigorous exercise look like? It's as easy as going for a jog or a bike ride with a friend at a conversational pace. Exercise is the miracle drug that it's almost impossible to get people to take. So the guy on the screen, I don't know how many of you recognize him, but this is Jim Thorpe. Jim Thorpe was the most famous athlete of his generation, and some people say the greatest athlete of all time. He was born in 1888 in Oklahoma, of mixed parentage, Native American and European ancestry. And he went on to win gold medals in the Olympic Games in 1912 in both pentathlon and decathlon. And then he went on to a professional career in American football, baseball, and basketball. And there's a famous story about Jim Thorpe, and it's probably apocryphal, but I like to tell it anyway. He once lay down on his back and tried to move the way a newborn baby does. And within a few minutes, he had to stop because he was exhausted. So we're born kicking and screaming playful and active. But by the time we finish high school, we're indoctrinated into a sedentary way of life. How much exercise do our kids need? We know that adults don't need that much, but we know that most of them don't meet those minimum requirements. In adults, about 90% of people fail to meet those minimum requirements I told you about. And about a quarter of adults are completely sedentary in their leisure time. Health Canada recommends that in order for children and adolescents to maintain good health, that they exercise moderately hard for about an hour a day. I'd like to tell you our kids are doing better, but a study from Acti Healthy Kids Canada in 2008 showed that by the time kids finish school, about 1 in 6 boys are active, and about 1 in 20 girls meet those minimum requirements that I told you about. A study published in 2012 in my own professional journal, Canadian Family Physician, a study done in the Saskatoon public education system, showed that about 9% of boys meet those minimum requirements, and about 6% of girls. So how does that happen? From the time we begin school, at the tender age of 4 and 5, we're indoctrinated into that sedentary way of life. The education system, whether it's public or private, is predicated upon sitting still in front of a teacher, a blackboard, or a screen for up to 6 hours a day. In this world of the 3 R's and standardized testing and global economic competitiveness, there isn't much room for physical exercise and activity. The only people who have it worse than phys ed teachers are probably art and music teachers, because when governments cut funding to the bone and schools have to cut, that's where they make their cuts. Recess, one of the few times in the course of a day where kids get to be active, is short. And in a northern country like ours, by the time kids get dressed and undressed during the winter months, there's hardly enough time left to play. When I was a kid and a teenager growing up, physical education in high school was mandatory. We had 3 50-minute periods of physical education per week. Now, by the time kids get to high school, it's optional. And in the last 1 or 2 years of high school, most kids participate in no physical activity while at school at all. And parents don't help. Lots of kids today get driven to school, even though they may live just a few blocks away. And the thing that disturbs me the most is what happens to girls. There's clear evidence from research that girls disproportionately drop out of being active by the time they reach the end of high school, under the influence of peer pressure. It's just not that cool to be a physically active, fit girl. But I happen to think that being a physically active girl and woman is super cool. And this is a super cool friend of mine named Tara Norton. Like a lot of girls, Tara was pretty active when she was a kid. But in high school, under the influence of her peers, she stopped swimming and doing all the things that she loved. But luckily, when she went to university, she got away from all that and rediscovered a love of swimming, started rowing. And now she's a professional triathlete who holds the course cycling record at Lanzarote, one of the toughest Ironman courses in the world. Now, Tara's an overachiever, and not every girl or woman needs to be like her. But she's proof that being fit and being active and being female is really cool. So I want to get back to the second thing I told you, or I want to tell you a second thing in my talk, and that is that I don't think this is a problem that doctors like me or the healthcare system is going to solve. When I was in medical school, I can remember absolutely no education about the health benefits of exercise or how to counsel people to do it. In my undergraduate years, I can remember two things that had anything at all to do with the subject. The first was a question on my third-year physiology exam in which we were asked to discuss the advantages taking a beta blocker, a drug that slows down your heart rate, would give to Olympic biathletes in competition. And the second was during a clinical session with a well-known local cardiologist who said, "Whenever I get the urge to exercise, I lie down and have a chocolate." And that was that. Most of what I've learned about counseling my patients to be active and to be fit, I've learned through my career as an athlete and a parent and a volunteer coach. So I hope you're not too depressed right now, because I'm going to give you some hope. So if doctors and the healthcare system can't fix the problem, who can? Well, the solutions lie with us, and I think they lie in our schools and our communities. And here's the good news, because I'm a researcher too, and a journal editor. Scientific research overwhelmingly shows that the most effective interventions to get kids moving and active and keep them that way occur in schools and community-based programs. So every fall, in the neighborhood where I live, there's a steady stream of kids, beginning in September, run past my house, and down our street, and into a nearby park. They range in age from about 7 to 14 years of age, and they come in all kinds of sizes, shapes, and colors. Some are fast, but many are slower. But the thing is, they're all running. But it wasn't always that way. So I want to tell you a story about a dedicated volunteer parent named Brent Lockridge in my community, and a phys ed teacher named John Ellis. Brent was a former professional hockey player, played in Europe. And in his 30s, he took up the sport of triathlon. But that's not why he got involved in getting kids to run and be more active. Brent grew up out west in a family with a tradition of volunteerism. His grandfather and his father coached and organized hockey and baseball in the community where he grew up. So giving back to your community, and especially giving back to its kids, was just something that you did. So in about the year 2000, when Brent's own kids started at the local school, something bugged him, disturbed him. And it was the fact that every year in school track and field meets, only a handful of kids got to participate. And not surprisingly, it was the strongest and the fastest. And in a school of about 800, that meant that maybe a dozen or 24 children got to participate. So Brent did something. He went and he met with a phys ed teacher, John Ellis. And they talked about what they could do to get more kids active. And they decided to start a cross-country running program. Now, at the beginning, the number of kids who participated was small. But over the last number of years, over 300 kids get out and run every morning of the week in the fall and the spring and participate in local cross-country meets and races. And if I said to most of you guys, hey, tomorrow I'm going to come to your workplace or your business and I'm going to start a cross-country running program, most of you would say, oh, hang on there, Nick. I'm just going to lie down and have a chocolate. and I'm going to think about this. So I was curious, how did Brent Lockridge and John Ellis get over 300 kids, that's almost half the school, out of bed every morning and away from their electronic devices to run? So I asked them, and they told me some interesting things. So the first thing that they did was to set the bar low, but the bar to participation, and that's why they chose cross-country running. It's simple, it's cheap, and anybody can do it. And here's the really subversive thing. Unlike other running events and many athletic events, cross-country running is a team sport. So in order for your team to win, it's the aggregate score of your places that counts. So it's an advantage to help each other in the race and finish as close together as you can. The second thing that they told me was that you need rules, because kids like rules, but more important than that, they value fairness. So the only thing you had to do to be able to participate in races was to show up and work hard. The least important thing was how fast you were. And the third thing was to make it fun. The message the kids got was that the most important thing was to participate, to be positive, and to work hard. Now, there was one other thing that Brent shared with me, and it's this. He and John spent more time coaching the parents than they did coaching the kids. Coaching them to keep their expectations low. Because if there's one thing I know as a volunteer coach, it's the surest way to ruin sports for kids is to involve the parents. Because then it becomes about winning and being the best. What John Ellis and Brent Lockridge have created in our community is something truly special, where kids get a chance to enjoy the pleasure of moving and running and the camaraderie of their friends. The other thing is that it doesn't just end when they leave the middle school in grade 8. One of the beneficiaries of this program has been the local high school. The cross-country coach who teaches there can't believe what he's inherited, because every year now there are dozens and dozens of kids who come from our school who want to be involved in track and field and cross-country. But before you all run off and try and start a cross-country program in your local school or community, I want to leave you with a couple other messages I got from Brent. So the first is, whatever activity you choose, it has to be consistent with the values and the interests of your community. Cross-country running in a middle-class neighborhood like this one was a great fit, but in another community it might be something different. He told me about a program in a nearby school called Reading and Running. Most of the kids are children of new immigrants to Canada, and literacy and fluency in English is important to them. So what do? They run, and then they get to read. And the second thing is, parents are a double-edged sword, but you need them. You need to involve them. You can't run a program involving so many children without getting parent volunteers to lace up their runners once in a while and help out. So my final message to you is this. It's absolutely critical that we get and keep our kids active and moving. If we don't, we are faced with a tsunami of chronic diseases in our neighborhoods and our communities. The problem seems huge, but I think that the solution is small. It can be as simple as getting kids moving and doing what comes naturally to them. And I think that Brent Lockridge and those cross-country kids show us a way. Thank you.